Are you thinking about selling PCs on Facebook Marketplace? Or are you already listing your PCs on Facebook Marketplace but struggling to get impressions and sales? Welcome to Casual Tech Review and welcome to part 3 of my beginner's guide to PC flipping. In this video, I'm going to give you 4 ways to increase your impressions on your ads and to effectively communicate with potential buyers. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video, a couple of things. Number one, I'm just getting over being sick, so please excuse if my voice sounds a little bit rough. Number two, each and every PC sales market is going to be a little bit different. So you are going to have to customize your approach to the type of customers that you're seeing and dealing with. Profit is not the primary motive for me flipping and selling PCs. It's a part of it for sure, and I like the making money aspect of it, but it's not the most important thing to me. I don't prioritize profit over everything else. I also like to focus on quality and aesthetics, which are usually things that end up costing me as the builder rather than the buyer. I make sure that I use really good quality parts, put money into aesthetics, and not everyone does that. I don't use cheap RAM or power supplies or motherboards. I make sure everything's working good before I sell. In fact, just as a way of reference, my average profit for all the PCs that I've sold is $151.85. You will absolutely find people who are making a lot more money per build than me. I'm just not always comfortable with the way they go about doing it. So let's get right into the 4 tips that I have for being successful selling your PCs in your local market. And we're going to use my latest PC flip as an example. So, starting with tip number 1, we're going to talk about pictures. Pictures are one of the most important parts of your ad, and I'm going to show some pictures from my latest build on there as far as how I set them up. So, once your build is done, taking good pictures is going to be your next step. And if you want to see a whole video about how I set up a computer to sell it, drop a comment and let me know. There are different styles for taking pictures. These are what works for me. Number one, I make sure I have a clean background. You can see my workbench here. I've got a nice wood grain desk with a plain white wall in the background. Sometimes you will see this little piece of artwork one of my kids made for me. It's an American flag with their hand placed the stars. That makes it in some of my pictures and whatever. I don't really care about that. I'm going to make sure the first thing I upload is a 30-second, roughly 30-second video of the PC working and just kind of panning around, showing different angles of it and displaying the quality of the workmanship that goes into it. I'm then going to take multiple photographs from different angles, highlighting various parts of the computer. I'm going to make sure that I zoom in on the core components, catch some different angles of the front, of the side with the glass off, again with that clean background. And I usually end up getting a shot of the I/O as well, just to make sure everybody knows it's clean and nice looking on the back of the PC. Additionally, I'm going to throw up a couple benchmark or game results in photos on there. I typically use Unigine Heaven and Unigine Superposition. They show the CPU and the GPU right there and the FPS results. And I think that gives people a really good idea of what to expect performance-wise. Next up for tip number 2 is going to be your title and your description. And again, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm most comfortable with using the mantra of less words better.
Say
Try to
less.
not make the reading excessive. I don't know if people actually read those long descriptions. For the title, I usually will say gaming PC and then what the CPU and GPU is. These are the most important things to buyers, those 2 things and the price. So I make sure those are right there, obvious in the title. When it comes to the description, I'm going to do a very short summary of the intended use and maybe some key features of the computer. So does it have integrated Wi-Fi? Make sure it has activated windows, addressable RGB lighting, and any other maybe special things that the computer may have. I'm going to make sure that I include those in this really short summary to get them an idea of what they're getting. I'm going to let them know if it's for 1080p or 1440p or 4K, just so they know right up front what it's intended for. Then I'm going to list out the parts from the most relevant to the least relevant, and I'm going to use as much plain language as possible. So I'm going to say processor is this and go right down the line, processor, GPU, motherboard, RAM, storage, etc., and list out exactly what parts are in that computer. Sometimes people are very vague, And to me, that appears to be or could be slightly misleading, that there's something they don't want to tell you about the build. So I make sure I list the speeds of everything, the type of storage drive, everything, so that it's very clear what someone is getting. And then I put a short narrative at the end of it just to kind of wrap it all up. I always throw it out there that I'm willing to do a custom build for somebody if they want something different. And then I make sure I let them know that I'm not accepting trades. That's very important, and you're still going to get trade offers, but at least that gives me something to fall back on and say no. Tip number 3 is going to be about setting an effective price. If you planned your build the way that you should, and if you haven't watched my video about planning your build, I'll put a card up for it in the corner, but you should already know what your target list price is going to be based off what the cost is of what you've put into the build. And there's two schools of thought on setting price. The first is to build in some room to negotiate. If you've ever listed anything for sale on Facebook Marketplace, people are going to come at you and they're going to try to lowball you or do some weird trade or something like that. So, building in a little bit of room for negotiation is kind of expected on Facebook Marketplace. And if for some reason the person doesn't negotiate and they just offer you what you're asking, you're going to get a nice tidy little profit there. And that's happened to me multiple times where I put in a price of $50 higher than I was hoping to get. And turns out they just offer me what I'm asking and I end up with $50 extra dollars. So that's great. The second school of thought, and what I've recently started doing, is setting a lower price, a lower asking price on my builds, but also making a note in the description that the price is firm and I'm not going to be haggling. And I think that the lower initial price is really enticing to people. And I'll show you some data on that at the end here of how I've actually gotten more views with lower asking prices. And it also removes the haggling piece out of it. You don't go back and forth with people. I'm very clear. This is what I'm taking for the computer. If you're not offering this, then I'm not interested. So those are kind of the two different ways you can do it. Lately, for me, I've been going with the lower price point, but firm. And I think it works really well. Our final tip, tip number 4, is about negotiating and meeting with buyers. My number one rule is always to be polite. Regardless of how people come at me, I'm always going to treat them decently. You never know if you may end up with a repeat customer. They may come back to you. They may refer someone else to you. So I always treat people with respect, and I've never, ever regretted that. Number 2, know what your bottom line is on your build. Again, you are going to get lowballed a lot by people. And if your PC's been sitting for sale for a little while, you may feel a little bit of pressure to try to get rid of it. And of course, that's up to you. You can decide how much you're willing to take on a computer. But if your price is realistic and you know you have a decent quality computer at a competitive price, I would urge you just hang on to it, stick to your bottom line, and continue to list it or take it off and relist it in a few days. But definitely don't hamstring yourself just because you feel desperate. I've had PCs sit on the market for a little while. I don't reduce the price because when you reduce the price, you show people you're desperate to sell it. You're just going to attract more lowballs. So don't do that. And kind of the second part of this is actually meeting buyers. Number 1, always establish your payment method before you meet them so they don't try to pull anything funny at the meet location. You want that all to be ironed out beforehand. And me personally, I always meet people in a public place. I've lots of folks say, "Well, I want to test it out. Can I come to your house?" Absolutely not. I just tell them straight up, I don't meet people at my house. If you absolutely have to test the PC, then, I don't think this is going to work out. Thanks for talking with me. And I've had that happen a couple times, and I'm okay with that. That's just a personal thing for me. I always meet people in a public place, and I make sure that I'm happy to send them videos or whatever they may want to prove that it's working. But that is just kind of my advice for meeting with people, especially when you're talking about exchanging hundreds of dollars or a valuable PC. I try to take every reasonable precaution that I can. So let me talk about my most recent PC flip and kind of how it went. Here it is. It features a Ryzen 7 3800X. I got that for $70 on Facebook Marketplace. An ASRock B550 motherboard. I got that on Newegg for $90. It's white. It looks really good. It fit great in the build. I've got 32 gigabytes of DDR4 G-Skill RAM. I paid $40 for that on Facebook Marketplace. An awesome Sabrent Rocket 1 terabyte NVMe. This computer actually had a 500 gigabyte NVMe in it when I listed it. The guy wanted to upgrade it to 1 terabyte, so I did charge him another $50 for that. An XFX 6650 XT graphics card. I got it for $165 on Facebook Marketplace, and I spray painted it white, and I think it looks pretty good. And a PVA Prestige 600 power supply, $51.99 on Amazon. I got a Thermalright 240 millimeter AIO on Amazon for $44. The Okonos Aqua 5 that was graciously provided to me by Okonos, so that was nothing. That was worked out pretty well. And I also got some Okonos cable extensions from Amazon for $15. And then I got my Windows key from My Keys Shop. So all in all, my all-in price on this build was $531.67, and I sold it for $750, bringing my total profit to $218.33. But let's take a look at the engagement on this. So after just one day, I had 238 clicks, 6 saves, and a share after just one day. After 2 days, which it sold after the second day, I had 733 clicks, 24 saves, and 2 shares. So that is an incredible amount of engagement for just 2 days on the market, sold really, really fast using the exact same tips that I've just passed on to you. Now let me show you some examples from some other builders in my area to kind of highlight my points. So here's a couple builds from the same seller, really good pictures. You can see here he turns the lights kind of down on his, which highlights the RGB, which I think looks good. He's got a nice clean background, really well done. He is very, very detailed in his descriptions. He writes a lot more than me. He also sells computers, so this is definitely a viable way to do it. I'm not downing him at all. He does a great job. He's actually really great to talk to. He does do the price is firm, as you can see right here in the middle of his description, which is kind of where I got the idea, is from him, and I really like that. Here's another seller, same kind of look, right? It's a very nice picture. It really highlights the clean lines of the build and just how nice he did. He also does a really long description, but he's doing well also. So there's not one way to do any of this. These are different ways of doing the same thing, but you can see the consistency of very detailed descriptions as far as exactly what parts are in the build, nice pictures. Here's an example of one that's been sitting on the market for 9 weeks. I've actually interacted with this guy some. I've tried to buy this computer for a lot less than what he's asking. So far, he hasn't budged. But you can see he's only got a couple pictures. They're not very good. And his description is really minimal. He doesn't even lay out all the parts that are in the computer. Nobody's going to spend $700 on a computer that they don't even know what's in it. So just a couple of examples to keep in mind. There's more than one way to do this, but there are also some things that definitely will not work. You have to put the time in with good pictures, a good title and description, set a realistic price, and then follow that up with good negotiations with your buyers. If you follow these 4 tips and customize them to your own market, I can promise you, you will see better results as you're listing and selling your PCs that you're building, particularly if you follow the same methods as me, which is focusing on good quality builds with quality parts and nice aesthetics. Let me know which tip 1 through 4 was the most helpful for you. And if you implement any of these things, leave another comment and let us know what the results are. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you for bearing with my terrible sounding voice. We'll see you on the next one.